What if one scientist's decision in a quiet French suburb could determine whether Saddam Hussein ever owned a nuclear bomb? What if that choice, made without permission and under a false name, triggered an operation that even Mossad couldn't control? Avner never saw himself as a saboteur. He was a physicist first, an operative second. Yet, on a cold morning in April 1979, his assignment changed from gathering information to quietly delaying the most dangerous construction project in the Middle East. The location, France. The target, a reactor bound for Iraq. The risk, that Israel's enemies would reach nuclear capability before the world even knew what had happened. Avner's cover identity was simple but convincing. Jean-Paul Roux, freelance consultant in materials engineering. His task was to infiltrate the network of French subcontractors supplying sensitive equipment to Iraq. For 2 months, he studied blueprints, memorized faces, traced shipping routes, and phoned in quiet, encrypted progress reports to a number in Tel Aviv that never called him back. The silence was part of the protocol. It was also what kept him awake at night. He thought his mission was routine intelligence collection: observe, report, disappear. It wasn't. Someone above him had changed the mandate. Now, delays were needed, accidents, anything that would push back Iraq's construction schedule without revealing interference. That change made Avner hesitate. He knew what delay really meant: tampering, sabotage, or worse. He wasn't trained for that. He was trained to spot irregularities in industrial design, not to create them. But when the order came in, a single line transmitted through cipher: slow the project by any means practical, he obeyed. At the Saclay Research District outside Paris, he began to notice what his reports hadn't captured. French technicians working overtime, silent deliveries leaving after midnight, military-grade crates labeled hydraulic test systems. Something was accelerating. He realized Iraq had found pressure points of its own, political ones. Contracts moved faster, export permissions were quietly ignored, and officials who raised doubts were replaced overnight. The game had started long before Mossad entered. Avner was already behind. 3 days into his new tasking, he met a retired nuclear engineer named Philippe Duret, one of the original designers of France's research reactor line. Duret had been brought in as a consultant for Iraq's program. Over coffee, he confided his worries: design shortcuts, unresolved safety protocols, missing radiation shielding. They want power before protection, he said. And no one dares tell them the risks. Avner listened, sensing both opportunity and danger. Here was a man with insider access and moral hesitation, a perfect information source. But Mossad protocol forbade direct recruitment without clearance. Still, Avner couldn't ignore what Duret hinted at. A shipment leaving Antwerp contained the reactor's core containment ring. If destroyed or delayed, it could halt the project for months. He sent the details to Tel Aviv that night. 48 hours later, the reply came back: pursue Duret. Do not expose. That same week, Duret's car left the road outside Fontainebleau, crashing into a roadside barrier. No sign of brakes, no witnesses, no media coverage. The official report called it an accident. Avner knew better. The question was, whose work was it? Mossad never confirmed involvement, and inside the agency, some operatives whispered that another intelligence service had acted first. But the message to Avner was painfully clear. He was operating in contested territory. Someone else wanted the reactor delayed, and they were willing to eliminate people to make sure of it. The loss of Duret forced a new question for him. How much control did Mossad really have? Each step seemed to open a deeper layer of operations he didn't understand. Targets changed, codes changed, even his handlers changed. He started receiving messages signed by someone calling themselves Iliev. No rank, no designation, just directives. One night, in the narrow hallway of his hotel, he found an envelope under his door. Inside, a photograph of Duret's wrecked car, and on the back, one line: stay useful or stay silent. He didn't know if it came from his superiors or his enemies. Maybe there was no difference anymore. That was the first unresolved risk. The second came soon after. In early May, a shipment of reactor-grade components left the French port of La Seine-sur-Mer, destined for Basra. A transit delay of only 8 hours was enough for Mossad's Maritime team to intercept it unnoticed. Avner provided the original shipping manifest. But when reports came in that the shipment had malfunctioned in transit, leading to a warehouse fire that consumed most of its cargo, Avner realized something he hadn't accounted for. One of the destroyed crates contained safety monitoring instruments, not reactor parts, civilian equipment. The wrong shipment had been hit. In his next encrypted message, his tone shifted. He asked whether future interference would include human targets. The reply came instantly, without signature. Collateral is operational reality. That line stayed with him. It was the seed of a cost he couldn't yet define, something personal, inevitable, waiting in shadow. France's internal security agency began investigating the string of accidents. The investigation closed within a week, officially citing negligence at the ports. But, off record, several contractors linked to Iraq's program were advised to review their foreign staff lists. Avner's cover now existed on those lists. He didn't need to be told what that meant. He started preparing escape contingencies. A false passport hidden in a Paris bank deposit box, a route through Geneva, emergency money and unmarked bills. But withdrawal wasn't approved. Not yet. Mossad needed more data, which specific components were still being shipped and when. That meant staying inside the very network now under scrutiny. Each move increased the risk of exposure. Tel Aviv promised extraction within weeks. Weeks became months. Avner began noticing subtle shifts. French colleagues who once greeted him now avoided contact. Phone lines clicked mid-conversation. A man in a gray Peugeot tailed him from Saclay to his apartment twice in 1 week. He reported it, received no reply, and decided to assume surveillance was permanent. Yet, amid all of it, he discovered something that changed everything. In the design papers for the Osirak reactor, there were inconsistencies between the French and Iraqi technical specifications. One reactor core wasn't being built, it was 2 different designs being combined. Such a hybrid had no precedent in civilian energy production. If correct, Iraq was building something the French themselves didn't fully understand. Avner sent the details north through his cipher route. Silence followed. No confirmation, no denial, just nothing. It was the first time his coded acknowledgement key didn't return an echo. For a moment, he considered whether his channel had been shut down, whether Mossad had lost faith in his reporting, whether he was already written off. But the next morning, a message slipped under his door again. No photograph this time, just a typewritten note. Stay close to the engineers. New orders pending. He couldn't tell if it came from Mossad or someone else listening to the same line. Either way, the meaning was clear. The operation was far from over, and his position, compromised or not, remained critical. He folded the note, slid it into his pocket, and waited by the window until sunrise. Every instinct told him extraction was overdue. But the reactor construction wasn't slowing down. Iraq was moving faster than anyone predicted. He looked at the photo of Durrett on his desk, the one taken weeks before the crash, and whispered a question to no one. If Mossad failed to stop this, who would? And deeper still, was someone already ahead of them? For 3 months, Avner's reports vanished into silence. Neither acknowledgement codes nor intercept relays returned. In intelligence work, that kind of silence could mean 2 things. Either the mission had ended, or he no longer had superiors. He kept working as if the connection still existed. Every morning he left his apartment in Paris, walked to the Saclay district under the identity of Jean-Paul Roux, and kept watching the men building Iraq's future power source. But by late summer, everything around him had changed. The Iraqi delegation visiting France had doubled in size. Contracts that once moved through official channels now passed through private ones. And overnight, one French supplier Avner thought was central to the project was dropped entirely, without explanation. The pieces of the supply chain he thought he understood had shifted. The only thing more confusing was the way Tel Aviv finally reached out again. It wasn't through the cipher line or his handler code. The message arrived by mail, hidden in a chemistry textbook delivered to his hotel. Its first page contained only a date and hour, written in pencil, 18 August, Marseille. No signature, no instruction. Yet he recognized the handwriting. It wasn't his contact from Paris, it was Eliav, the ghost in his messages. He almost didn't go. By this point, even a meeting could be a trap. But if it was genuine, it might be his only way to understand whether Mossad still trusted him or had quietly written him off. At a small dockyard outside Marseille, the answer came in the form of 2 words: Maritime delays. That was the new directive. Mossad had intercepted intelligence, indicating that the next shipment of reactor components, disguised as oceanographic research equipment, would sail from Cherbourg within days. The task wasn't surveillance anymore, it was disruption. But this time, no explosions, no traceable damage. The operation's design was surgical. Replace one crate's internal contents during transit with an identical shell designed to fail under compression testing once it reached Iraq. It would look accidental, a manufacturing defect, not deliberate interference. The goal was delay. Avner's assignment: coordinate with a maritime agent already embedded on the shipping route to oversee the swap. Simple in writing, impossible in execution. He hesitated. Do we have confirmation that the Iraqis don't have duplicates? Eliav didn't answer. Instead, he handed Avner a microfilm strip containing shipping manifests. The French don't even know half of what they're exporting, he said. We're not just stopping one reactor. We're changing their story before anyone asks questions. That line stuck with Avner. Changing their story. It sounded less like intelligence work and more like rewriting history. The operation unfolded fast. In Antwerp, during a port transfer, the designated crate was removed under false maintenance orders, replaced with its twin, and sent on to Basra. Everything worked flawlessly, until 2 days later, reports came in that another shipment from a different supplier exploded while being loaded onto a truck outside Toulon. 4 people were killed, all contractors, none connected to Mossad's operation. The pattern was unmistakable. Someone else was interfering too. Avner's secure line came alive that night for the first time in months. The voice on the other end wasn't Eliav. It was a man speaking formal Hebrew, calm but detached. You were told to delay the project, he said. You were not told to destroy civilian property. Avner protested. That wasn't us. It mirrors our method, but too visible, too soon. The line cut. No response. He spent the next 48 hours waiting for arrest. Nothing happened, which only deepened the suspicion. If it wasn't Mossad, and it wasn't the French, then who else had enough reach to kill entire shipments? He started documenting everything, each new incident, each unexplained accident. He wasn't trusted to know the full picture, but he could feel a new game being played above his own level. And somewhere inside Mossad, people were debating whether their entire operation had been compromised or hijacked. When he finally met Eliav again in Paris, the conversation turned openly fractious. They're copying our tactics, Avner said. Whoever it is, they're using our pattern: fire, shipment, silence. Which means, Eliav replied, we're doing something right. Or, Avner pushed back, we're being framed. That was the first open argument between them. Eliav, usually calm, dropped his professional detachment. You think too small, Avner. We're not the only ones watching Iraq. Maybe someone wants us to take the blame so they can finish the real job quietly. He didn't say who that someone was, and Avner didn't ask. But the idea lodged deep in his mind. What if Mossad wasn't the main actor anymore? That single thought would later unravel everything. The disruption campaign escalated. Parts went missing, blueprints were altered, shipments delayed indefinitely. The French companies involved complained to their government, but officials dismissed it as logistical chaos. Then, for the first time since he'd begun his mission, Avner received orders to withdraw temporarily to Rome. Headquarters wanted him to relay his field analysis before another stage began, a move that sounded like relief but smelled like recall. He took the train south, crossing into Italy under his false identity, carrying nothing but coded notebooks and one reel of undeveloped film. But when he arrived at the safe location, his contact never showed. Instead, the radio channel he monitored carried a short coded update. Project continuity verified. New specifications received. Reactor type updated. He replayed the code 5 times. the meaning didn't sink in until hours later. The blueprints he had been working from, the same designs that guided every act of sabotage, were no longer valid. Iraq had received a modified reactor core from France, a design that used different fuel rods, a different coolant system, and a completely new control grid. All of the previous disruptions had targeted obsolete components. Every part Mossad delayed or destroyed was unnecessary to the actual reactor now being assembled. For Avner, the revelation landed like betrayal. They hadn't slowed the project, they had cleared the way for Iraq to rebuild faster, without outdated obstacles. He didn't even know whether headquarters was aware. His mission might have already become meaningless. He tried to reach Tel Aviv through the cipher line again, using alternate keys. The response came not in code, but as a plain language telex. Maintain cover until further instruction. Data recalibration in progress. No reassurance, no apology, and no clarity. He sat in his hotel room that night, replaying every manipulation, every silence. Had Eliav known? Had Mossad deliberately misled him to flush out a competing intelligence service? Or worse, had Israel built its own operational illusion, feeding its agents just enough truth to test their commitment? Whatever the answer, the new information changed everything. The operation he thought was defensive now had the potential for catastrophe. If Iraq's updated reactor went online, it wouldn't be a delay of months. It would mean the Middle East entering a nuclear threshold. Within Mossad's command structure, panic followed revelation. Some demanded immediate escalation, direct action inside Iraq before the reactor was operational. Others argued that the intelligence was compromised and that any strike risked legal and political isolation. The question reached the Prime Minister's desk. Was a military strike justified on uncertain information? Inside the Paris mission, the argument filtered down to Avner and Eliav. "We have to suspend," Avner insisted. "We're acting on data that could be false by design. You saw the update. They changed the reactor." Eliav remained composed. "Do you think we can wait? When uranium arrives, there will be no safe target left." "We don't even know where the fuel is going anymore," Avner replied. "If we hit the wrong facility, then we adapt. But we don't stop." That conversation marked their fracture point. For the first time, Avner considered disobedience, reporting directly to a field analyst in Tel Aviv over Eliav's head. But that route required confirming his location, which risked exposure. To act was dangerous, to stay silent was worse. Finally, Mossad's leadership issued a temporary pause, no further incidents until verification. For the operatives inside France, it was effectively an abort order. Even that didn't bring relief. Avner had learned to distrust clear orders. They were often preludes to worse news. When he arrived at what was supposed to be an extraction meeting in Lyon, Eliav wasn't there. Instead, a courier delivered a sealed envelope marked "Return North, Urgent." Inside were satellite images of Iraq, blurred and incomplete, but clear enough to show one thing. The reactor site was expanding rapidly, far beyond the blueprints known to Mossad. Someone in Iraq had already foreseen sabotage, had built redundancies, and had done so quietly. For Avner, doubt turned into dread. Everything he relied on, intel, contact lines, even the purpose of his mission, was now uncertain. The realization came cruelly simple. Mossad hadn't been the architect of the operation. It had been reacting, layer by layer, to an opponent already inside the system. He stared at the new reconnaissance images until dawn. Then he packed his suitcase, leaving behind the forged passport he once prepared for escape. If he fled now, the mission would evaporate with him. If he stayed, he risked becoming a liability. Neither choice promised survival. Before leaving the room, he tore the Marseille meeting note into pieces. Those two words, "maritime delays," scattered across the floor like relics of a story that no longer made sense. The reactor wasn't slowing down. The shadow network sabotaging shipments wasn't Mossad alone. And the man he trusted most, Eliav, might not even be on his side. He walked outside into the streetlight haze, aware of the surveillance car parked 2 blocks away. Maybe French intelligence had finally caught on. Maybe someone else was watching. Either way, he now understood the bitter truth. No one knew what game they were playing anymore. And somewhere between Paris and Baghdad, the reactor kept rising from the sand, unfinished, unverified, and unstoppable. Rome, February 1981. Avner waited in a cafe that smelled of burnt espresso and diesel fuel, unaware that his decision in the next hour would decide whether Israeli pilots lived or died 4 months later. Eliav was late again. Every delay now carried meaning. When he finally entered, his first words were not a greeting but a line that wiped away 6 months of confusion. "It's happening. They're no longer asking if, they're asking when." Avner didn't respond. He'd expected the airstrike debate to stretch for months. Instead, Eliav unfolded a small satellite photograph across the table, grainy, tilted, but unmistakable. The Osirak dome glowed white under desert light. The image was marked with a new date. The construction pace had doubled. Without intervention, uranium fuel would be installed within 6 weeks. "They're saying it's operational?" Avner asked. Eliav hesitated. "They're saying nearly." But nearly is enough. The plan was brutal in simplicity. The Israeli Air Force would execute a pinpoint strike before activation. Mossad's role was to confirm target integrity and provide updated coordinates. The problem, no one inside the agency trusted the new data since the reactor redesign fiasco. Verification required something human, something from someone who had seen the facility up close, which meant one final field assignment for Avner. He was to meet a new intermediary, an Iraqi scientist who defected to Europe weeks earlier, now hiding in Italy under temporary Western protection. The defector allegedly had the final layout of the active reactor, including power coupling points and potential ammunition storage. The information could guarantee mission success, or fatally mislead it. Hours later, in a shabby safe house near Trastevere, Avner came face to face with the man. He was young, nervous, barely older than a graduate student. His English broken but deliberate. He laid out diagrams on the table, his hands trembling. Lines, measurements, annotations, all neat, confident strokes. Then, as if remembering something he shouldn't say, the scientist paused. "But my supervisor said the French redesign was unstable," he added. They installed a second shielding wall around the main vessel. Extra containment for calibration. Avner froze. A second wall. That detail wasn't in any satellite photo. If true, the strike plan that Mossad was relaying, based on a single, precise penetration angle, would fail entirely. The initial bomb wave would disperse harmlessly against the new shield, and the follow-up detonation would scatter radioactive debris across Baghdad. He recorded every word, transmitted the coordinates through his secure line, and waited for confirmation. None came. 24 hours later, Mossad sent a coded reply, unverified. Proceed with standard pattern. Standard pattern meant pretend the risk didn't exist. 2 weeks later, Avner was back in Tel Aviv for the first time in a year. Headquarters looked less like a directed command and more like a collection of private arguments. Some officers demanded that the operation halt until verification came from a second satellite pass. Others argued any delay could turn the strike into a diplomatic disaster if the reactor became active. "They'll call it an attack on civilian infrastructure," one analyst said. "We'll be outlaws." The room divided in half, those fearing radioactive fallout and those fearing an atomic Iraq. The Prime Minister pushed through the risk assessment sheet and spoke quietly. "If it's wrong, we'll live with the consequences. If we wait, there may be none left to live with." That settled the politics. It did not settle the intelligence. Avner hadn't slept in 3 days. He knew the coordinates he'd provided might contain a critical flaw, an incorrect assumption he'd made when transcribing the defector's diagram. The man had drawn the building orientation relative to the setting sun, not true north. If Mossad used that direction literally, every angle of strike was off by several degrees. He tried to correct it. He couldn't. The operation order had already circulated to the Air Force under the designation Operation Opera. When he confronted Eliav, voice shaking, the handler spoke with terrifying calm. "You think there's time to fix an orbiting satellite's mapping grid? There isn't. We trust what we have. We act." Avner stared at him. "If the alignment's wrong, they'll hit the wrong section." Eliav's reply came colder than any order. "Then they'll hit something." The first false start came in early May. The strike pilots, 8 F-16S and 6 F-15 escorts, assembled in the Negev for live fuel rehearsal. Midway through the simulation, a sandstorm triggered false radar signatures. The targeting system misread the coordinates by 40 miles. Command ordered immediate hold. For 48 hours, the operation appeared dead. Avner watched from the outer ring of the command bunker as arguments exploded, literal shouting matches between Mossad analysts and Air Force officers. Too risky, too uncertain, too political. A new voice entered the conversation, not a general, but a physicist from Israel's Dimona reactor team. He warned that any strike without confirmation of the reactor's containment wall could disperse plutonium particles into the air, contaminating Baghdad for decades. Begin's aides cut the feed mid-sentence. Politics had replaced caution. The mission was revived under a single condition: Mossad would reconfirm visual data, not electronically, physically. That meant sending a field operative near the target. No one volunteered. For 3 days, Avner waited for that order to attach his name to it. When it didn't come, he assumed Eliav had sheltered him. Then, on the evening of May 28, a classified envelope arrived at his Tel Aviv apartment. No greeting, just an assignment line. Supervise relay confirmation before strike. Non-contact. Do not expose. He drove to an auxiliary signal station outside Beersheba, where Mossad's communications team triangulated imaging satellites over Iraq. The feed came in, distorted, static-filled. The second containment wall was visible, but only partially. It could have been scaffolding, or error, or deception. The Mossad chief asked him a single question: "Does this look active to you?" Avner hesitated. The lights visible on the thermal feed could indicate power testing or not. He didn't know. But he understood the real question underneath, that politics required certainty, not truth. He gave the one answer he knew they wanted. "It looks operational." The room went silent. Orders were typed. Aircraft were prepped. Avner's uncertainty had just triggered the countdown. June 7, 1981, 16:35 hours local time. The jets were already across Saudi airspace when Mossad's relay intercept caught something no one expected: unidentified commercial flights entering the corridor from the west. Every simulation assumed the route would remain clear. Now, civilian casualties were possible. An emergency advisory flashed across command channels. Abort window open, 30 seconds. Tel Aviv waited for someone, anyone, to confirm abort. Static filled the audio. The pilots flew on. Avner, stationed in the communications room, saw the abort code light flashing, unanswered. He turned to Eliav. "They haven't confirmed. Do we resend?" Eliav shook his head. "We resend, and they hesitate. They hesitate, and fuel costs them the return leg. They die over Iraq." The tension stretched into silence. Then, one voice crackled through, the lead pilot. "No civilians in corridor." Continuing. False alarm. Wrong radar reflection. The abort light went dark. Operation continued. Minutes later, the first bomb run began. But before release, another anomaly appeared: wind shear. The low-altitude crosswind deviated explosives' trajectory models by 5 degrees, enough to overshoot the reactor dome entirely. Avner's misaligned orientation data, the one he'd tried to correct, now compounded the error. The weapon track on the monitor veered westward. Eliav swore under his breath. "They're off. They're too far right." Command scrambled adjustment coordinates. Too late. The initial salvo struck an auxiliary structure, a research lab adjacent to the main dome. Secondary fire. Smoke obscured visibility. The mission was seconds from failure. Then, something unexpected occurred. The shockwave from that misplaced detonation blew open the external shielding wall, all that remained of the French expansion Avner had feared. The internal structure lay exposed. The second strike package followed immediately, hitting clean through. To every operator on screen, it looked orchestrated, effortless. It wasn't. It was chaos held together by miscalculation. When the last pilot signaled clear airspace, the command center erupted in restrained disbelief. The reactor was obliterated. Yet, behind the muted victory came one sound, Eliav exhaling like a man pulling himself from underwater. For the first time in years, he looked shaken. Avner couldn't celebrate. His wrong assumption, his skewed north alignment, had accidentally opened the attack angle that made success possible. If he'd been even 2 degrees further off, the outcome would have been catastrophic. He thought of that scientist in Rome, the words about the second wall, and felt nausea instead of pride. Hours later, debriefing began. Avner expected relief, correction, maybe even acknowledgement. Instead, the tone in the room turned glacial. A quiet operations analyst placed 2 photographs on the table. The first, the destroyed reactor under smoke. The second, a nearby site where French technicians had been scheduled to arrive the same morning. A weather delay had saved them. A 1-hour shift, and the mission would have killed civilians. The analyst's words were flat. Your reporting nearly turned this into a mass casualty strike. Avner tried to protest. It was the coordinates, not intent, that caused deviation. But inside Mossad, there was no line separating outcome from blame. He was ordered to remain inactive pending evaluation, bureaucratic code for disappearance. 3 days later, he sat on the roof of a safe house overlooking Tel Aviv, watching the media broadcast celebrating Israel's preventive success. Politicians called it precise engineering. He knew it had been blind luck. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Eliav didn't visit again. Only one message came, folded under his door, unsigned. History forgives the result, not the process. He read it twice and realized what few inside the agency dared say aloud. The operation's perfection came from its mistakes. Every hesitation, every wrong assumption, every aborted signal had aligned by accident. The false release moment arrived days later when the United Nations condemned the strike. For one brief instant, it seemed Israel might stand isolated, its intelligence network exposed. Then, unexpectedly, diplomatic outrage began to fade. World attention turned elsewhere: Lebanon, Afghanistan, the Cold War. Mossad considered the crisis over. But Avner knew false peace when he saw it. Each delay, every silence, every controlled lie, they hadn't ended a nuclear threat. They had institutionalized the idea that preemption by error could be justified. He poured another cup of black coffee and stared toward the horizon where night met sea. For the first time since the mission began, there were no directives waiting, no codes to send, no handlers to obey. Only one question left. If every success now depended on error, what would happen the day the error wasn't in Israel's favor? The smoke had barely settled above Baghdad before the consequences began. Some visible, most invisible, all inevitable. While the images of a collapsed dome filled television screens worldwide, Mossad analysts were already arguing over numbers. Radiation graphs showed lower contamination than feared, but the readings near the Euphrates were irregular. The thermal bloom sequences, replayed frame by frame, revealed a pattern that no one wanted to discuss. One of the bombs had detonated a few meters from its intended mark, fracturing storage tanks that fed into Iraq's civilian water system. The damage wasn't catastrophic, but it was traceable. And the signature of that ordnance, the alloy composition, fuse timing, and impact contour, pointed unmistakably to Israeli manufacturing. Within hours, the deniability strategy that Mossad had spent months constructing vanished. Israel could not hide its hand anymore. Avner was still inside a Tel Aviv debriefing room when French broadcast media broke the story, "Unprovoked Israeli attack on civilian nuclear infrastructure." The words "civilian" and "unprovoked" would echo across every capital city for the next 2 weeks. Menachem Begin called it self-defense. Washington called it an act of unilateral aggression. Paris called it a betrayal. In intelligence briefings, some tried to downplay the implications. "They'll move on," one senior officer said. "A week of outrage, then quiet." But Avner understood international attention didn't fade, it mutated. The silence after outrage was not peace, it was observation. Inside Mossad, silence turned into suspicion. Field agents began combing through communication archives, trying to find the leak that had exposed them. Every uncovered misstep led back to the same pattern: the sabotage confusion, the reactor redesign, the phantom accidents. The agency's senior analysts started asking whether foreign hands had been steering them since the beginning. One internal memo surfaced, unsigned, likely from a disillusioned operations planner, claiming an unnamed Western service had leaked partial intelligence to push Israel toward early action, forcing its hand before Iraq's nuclear status could be verified. The logic was brutal. Better Israel shoulder international blame than implicate others in unauthorized surveillance inside France. Mossad's leadership suppressed the memo instantly, labeling it speculative. But Avner heard a copy had circulated through external circles. Whether true or not, it left a rot that never vanished, an uncertainty about who had really planned Operation Opera and who had simply executed someone else's design. That institutional fracture began before the first anniversary even arrived. The second fracture was personal. Avner's disappearance from active duty came quietly. No ceremony, no termination letter, just the slow erasure of access. Passwords revoked, clearances suspended, messages unanswered. Officially, he had been reassigned to non-operational analysis. In real terms, he had been locked out from the world he'd built his life around. His data logs, once trusted field reports, were now evidence of procedural fault. The misaligned coordinates, the hesitation before confirmation, every decision he'd agonized over was unpacked as a line in post-op hearings. Failure to register uncertainty, one report read. Potential bias toward premature validation. Another added, operational advantage achieved through unverified input cannot form precedent. He read those lines late one night in a borrowed office and realized that the operation considered him both hero and liability. Hero for results, liability for methods. Neither brought dignity. When he pressed Elia for explanation, the handler's tone carried something almost like regret. "Wars end differently now," he said. "This one doesn't end at all, it loops. Even when the smoke clears, every move rewrites its own justification." "What happens to us?" Avner asked. Eliav paused. "To us, nothing visible. To history, maybe another silence." That was their last conversation. By late 1981, the geopolitical costs had hardened. France severed all nuclear cooperation with Israel. Contracts for reactor components, research exchanges, even industrial waivers, all canceled overnight. Diplomats withdrew quietly from Tel Aviv. The same engineers who once designed Israel's civilian reactors now refused to take phone calls. In Washington, back channels started closing. The U.S., though privately aware of Iraq's weapons ambitions, publicly condemned the strike to maintain legitimacy with Arab partners. For Mossad, the fallout was more practical. Intelligence sharing pipelines froze. Access to reconnaissance satellites was throttled. The entire Middle East desk found itself operating half-blind. Each of these fractures had been seeded by decisions made long before the strike, decisions that seemed minor at the time. The rush to act before confirmation, born from political urgency. The choice to prioritize deniability over precision. The faith that consequences could be managed once victory was achieved. Every thread led back to the same contradiction. Mossad had achieved tactical perfection through a chain of strategic errors. It was around this time that Avner's name surfaced again inside the agency, but not as operative. An internal ethics committee had been formed, quietly, to study predictive decision failures. His report, Logs from the Osirak mission, became case material in what rank-and-file agents mockingly called the after-action autopsy. He was summoned as witness. His presentation lasted 7 minutes before a senior commander interrupted. "So, you're saying we didn't succeed?" Avner replied. "We succeeded by accident." The room fell silent. No one disagreed openly, but no one nodded either. The transcript of that meeting was sealed. He was never invited back. For Israel, the political narrative moved on. For its enemies, it evolved. Saddam's regime used the attack as proof of Zionist aggression. Iraqi scientists who escaped the strike regrouped, this time underground. A smaller, more flexible research network emerged outside Baghdad, camouflaged as agricultural calibration projects. Years later, Western intelligence would identify remnants of that network during the Gulf War. The strike that was meant to end Iraq's nuclear dream had not ended it, it had transformed it. public ambition died. Secrecy replaced it. Mossad analysts recognized the irony too late. In destroying the public reactor, they gave Iraq justification for clandestine research, shielded by claims of national sovereignty and self-defense. Each follow-up operation would now operate in a darker space, where intelligence was less verifiable and moral thresholds blurrier. The victory narrative had created its own shadow war. Inside Mossad, the silence grew heavier. Agents who had prepared fake shipping lists or organized supply chain disruptions were now under quiet scrutiny for unapproved risk scenarios. Careers ended not by exposure, but by omission. Names vanished from rosters without announcement. Eliav kept his position, though barely. One reprimand followed him like a whisper through the halls, excessive operational delegation to unverified field source. He never mentioned Avner again. By 1982, funding priorities shifted. The agency redirected resources toward cyber surveillance capabilities as if the chaos of human error had become too expensive. Computers, not conscience, would handle decision latency next time. Avner occasionally saw reports of new satellite technology that automated strike mapping, systems meant to remove variables like his misaligned coordinates. Each advancement carried a strange satisfaction and a deeper sadness. The machines were learning to correct what humans could not, doubt. And so came the longer consequence, the one no one calculated. For a generation, Israel's doctrine changed subtly but completely. Preemption became policy. Intelligence no longer required certainty, only conviction. The phrase "begin doctrine" entered textbooks. The right to strike before danger matured. Politicians quoted it like scripture. Few remembered that the operation it came from had nearly collapsed under misinformation. In private circles, retired analysts would later say that Mossad never recovered its internal balance. After Osirak, the agency measured success less by accuracy and more by anticipation. Who struck first? Who waited? The focus shifted from understanding the enemy to predicting him, and in the hollow space between prediction and truth, operational ethics decayed. For Avner, that became unbearable. He left service in silence, no announcement, no biography. He drifted between teaching contracts in Europe under aliases too carefully chosen to be normal. Sometimes he'd catch glimpses of news archives, replaying grainy footage, 8 fighters in desert sky, collapsing dome below, and feel that strange mixture of guilt and gratitude that only survivors of covert wars understand. There was one final reckoning. In autumn of 1982, a journalist approached him outside a lecture hall in Zurich. She said she was writing about the ghosts of Osirak. She wanted to confirm a rumor that Mossad's success had depended on a miscalculated coordinate. Avner denied it. Then, as she was leaving, he asked, "If it were true, what would it change?" She stopped. "History," she said. He smiled faintly. "Only history cares what works by mistake. The men who made the mistake don't." Years passed. The silence stayed. Decades later, when archives declassified fragments of Mossad's pre-strike analyses, no one looked closely at the names. Avner was a footnote. Field liaison. France, Italy, operation support. The file ended with the notation: disposition, retired, presumed relocated. But in the corridors of Israeli intelligence training, his case became required reading, not for heroism, not for repentance, but for a single line scribbled on his final report draft: "Precision without perspective is just accident postponed." That phrase outlived every briefing and every debate. In the end, the world moved on. The operation entered military history under one headline: the perfect preemptive strike. But inside the institutions that had made it possible, there remained an unspoken acknowledgement. Perfection had been an illusion held together by chance. Avner never sought to correct the myth. Perhaps he understood that truth had no place in memory built for reassurance. Perhaps he simply tired of questioning ghosts. He lived quietly near Marseille, fittingly close to the port where his mission had begun. Once or twice a year, a small envelope appeared at his doorstep. No return address, only a single word. Still, he never replied. The operation ended on paper the moment the bombs fell. In every other sense, it never ended at all. You've been watching Hidden Ops. Subscribe to uncover the stories that didn't end where history said they did.